to you to figure it out.
So Pelly and his team set to work. He had already been responsible for several high-profile skyscrapers around the world, such as One Canada Square at Canary Wharf in London. But this new building for Petronas would have to be something entirely different.
One very key thing in my mind was that the building should not look like if it could have been built in the United States or anywhere in Europe, and we just happened to be building in Malaysia.
Pelly's initial designs were rejected on the grounds that they weren't Malaysian enough. What this really meant was that they weren't Islamic enough. What he needed was a bit of divine inspiration. We
went to Yale Library and we covered our tables with books on Islamic art, and it was very obvious. The key form in Islamic art is two interlaced squares, like this. And the two interlaced squares, traditionally in Islamic art, represent the incomprehensibility of God. And that's what we call arabesques.
Although this design ticked the right boxes with its Islamic reference, it didn't provide enough floor space. Pelly came up with a solution. By adding scallops between each point, he increased the usable area of each floor without losing the interlocking squares.
Eventually, we ended up adding another 8 semicircular elements, and that was what became the final form for the building.
The problem was this. As the tower got taller, the configuration of elevator shafts and floor space changed level by level, and of course, the tower narrowed. This caused the weight and, more crucially, the center of gravity to shift subtly, therefore very slightly pulling the tower to one side. Rather than throw the project in turmoil by rebuilding from scratch, the team decided to carry on building from where they were. Through exhaustive calculations, they worked out how they could build the tower inch by inch back into line and correct the lean. But the engineering headaches didn't end there. An even sterner test was provided by the skybridge.
Now, this skybridge is really cool, and it's one of the defining features of this whole construction. But the reality is it posed a challenge to the engineers. Believe it or not, all skyscrapers move just a little bit. So when you have two skyscrapers, each moving in a little bit of a different direction, you can't rigidly attach something in the middle, or it's going to snap off and spell disaster. So how do you allow everything to move and flex? Well, the engineers actually came up with a very interesting solution. They didn't attach the skybridge to either of the skyscrapers. It's actually just resting on the floor plate, and it's allowed to move in and out through a very tight slip joint by about 10 inches. It's also attached down below to one of these ball bearings, and it's kind of a ball and socket joint, kind of like the way your shoulder is attached to your torso, allowing it to move freely when everything else around it is moving in a little bit of a different direction. It's a very, very clever solution to a very difficult problem.
As the towers neared completion, the competition between the two teams of contractors became increasingly fierce. With the Japanese ahead, the developers attempted to even things out. This gave the Koreans their chance.
We had told the Japanese to slow down so that the Koreans will catch up that 4 weeks, because we wanted to make sure that when the pinnacle was put up, it was put up to the whole world as it came up together. In the end and in the day, contractors being what they are, the Koreans managed to push it up first.
When the colossal spires were finally levered into place, the towers officially overtook Chicago's Sears Tower as the world's tallest building. But the greatest achievement of the Petronas Towers is not so much their height, but their design, their look, and identity. They've instantly made themselves the focal point of the city, and in many ways, the country too. With little high-rise competition, they stand out majestically on the horizon. As much a statement of financial achievement as they are an affirmation of Malaysia's Islamic heritage. Today, thousands of workers and visitors use the banks of double-decker elevators to move through each tower. The famous bridge provides a useful link allowing each building's resources to be shared, as well as providing an alternative emergency exit. Unlike the fashionable, asymmetric twin towers of the international style, Pelly's twins stand proudly and classically, side by side, symmetrical and identical. A powerful design statement. What I really like about this building is the obvious. There are two of them. There are almost two forces at play here, kind of an East meets West, or maybe an old and new. And we even have this bridge connecting the two, which really, in some ways, serves as a metaphor to connect this country from its past to its more prosperous future. It's this symbolic strength that has helped cement the place of the Petronas Towers in the hearts and minds of the Malaysian people.
You know, I think in the early days, there were a lot of people who were quite critical about it as well. Why would we want to have the tallest tower in the world? Why would we want it? But as it grew and this whole precinct grew, it fell in place quite well. And I think a lot of people are very proud of it now. You know, it's become one of the icons of the country.
What do you think a building like this represents for Malaysia?
Development.
Or a vision of country toward the progress and
interest in architectural marvels. It's on par with any of the architectural wonders of this world.
I think it is the biggest icon of Malaysia. It represents Islamic structure, and that's what makes it, outstanding.
What is it about it that's particularly Islamic?
It represents two minarets of a mosque. It represents the whole Islamic world culture.
The elaborate symbolic detailing of the towers is all very well and good, but it can have its practical drawbacks. So here's a simple question. Most buildings are rectangular, or they at least have a flat top. How do you deal with the maintenance and cleaning windows on a building like this that has such an intricate shape and a spire at the top?
On top of this building, we have 2 machines, each on each tower.
So the units are hidden in the top of the crown?
Yes, it's hidden on top of the crown at level 88. Each machine will weigh about 25 to 30 tons, and we are talking about 2 machines, and a turntable, it weighs about 70 tons.
70 tons sitting on the 88th floor?
Yes.
Wow. And then the doors open, the arm reaches out.
Yes, the machine is having a 21-meter chip arm to cover the furthest part of the building. And end of the day, the machine will retract back and hide inside the building.
Okay, this is the time where I have to try it out for myself and find out firsthand just how challenging it is to wash the windows at the Petronas Towers. At times like this, you have to make sure you're firmly attached. Now this rig is really intense. It has a giant rotating gantry that then rotates into place, the doors open, and this enormous telescoping arm reaches out to go all the way over there. Feels like we're emerging from the Death Star. You know, this really feels like an amusement park ride, dangling from these 2 cables in this little bit of a wobbly bucket. I mean, if you can see me, there's a little bit of a wobble here. And you know, where we're shooting out on this thing, we're probably about 60 feet from the face, and we are literally right in the middle of the Twin Towers, hanging right over the sky bridge and right over the concert hall down below. You can also see how sculpted the park is. You know, this isn't sort of a park that just kind of rambles and meanders like a conventional English park. This looks like it was planned down to within an inch of its life. The public walking paths, the planted garden areas, even the children's play area, all of it looks like it was literally drafted right onto the landscape. You can see out here how much sun you get. There's just sun beating down on all of this glass all day long. So in order to shade the glass, they've actually created these protruding louvers, which cast deep shadows on the glass all day long as the sun sort of moves across the sky. What it also does is gives a lot of depth to the whole facade. But it's not the sun that's causing problems today. A huge tropical storm is rolling in at great speed. It's definitely not a time to be dangling out here between the towers in something that is not much more than an unprotected metal bucket. With more than a hint of relief, it's time to abort the mission and return to base.
Now, this part of the world is really known for its incredibly heavy rainstorms, especially in the afternoon. And you can see one rolling in right here, just the black clouds devouring the city. So not only does this building have to withstand tremendous heat from the sun, but it has to deal with these crazy rains and the lightning that must strike the building all the time. So far, it looks like it's holding up pretty well.
Cesar Pelli's vision and classic design has managed to transcend a cultural divide, providing an Asian nation with a defining piece of architecture.
Before these buildings were built, no one really knew where Malaysia was or what it stood for. These buildings now represent a new national identity, and almost anyone in the world can point to Petronas and they know that they are in Malaysia. So it's done a phenomenal job at helping to define a country moving forward into the future.